My name is Clara, and at 34 I finally achieved my dream of owning an oceanfront villa worth $2 million after years of building my real estate business. But my moment of triumph quickly soured when my younger sister Natalie called out of the blue. "We're on our way to you," she announced without even saying hello. "There will be 15 of us. Prepare beds, towels, slippers, food. We'll be staying for 3 weeks. We'll be there in 40 minutes, so hurry up." I smiled as I hung up the phone, but not for the reason she might have thought. Before I tell you what I did next, let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever had a family member take advantage of your success. Growing up, Natalie and I shared a middle-class home in a decent neighborhood near Boston. With a 7-year age gap between us, I often found myself in the role of second mother rather than just an older sister. Our childhood was relatively normal until I turned 18, and our parents decided to end their 20-year marriage. The divorce hit our family like a hurricane, leaving emotional debris scattered everywhere. While I was preparing for college, my parents were dividing assets and deciding custody arrangements. Since I was legally an adult, the custody battle centered entirely around 11-year-old Natalie. Eventually, the court granted primary custody to our mother with weekend visitations to our father. The divorce created 2 distinctly different paths for Natalie and me. I had to work part-time jobs throughout college to support myself. My parents were so consumed by their own emotional turmoil and financial struggles that they had little left to offer me. I waited tables, tutored struggling students, and even cleaned houses on weekends to pay for books and living expenses. Those years taught me self-reliance and the value of hard work. Meanwhile, Natalie became the center of both our parents' worlds. Perhaps driven by guilt over the divorce, they showered her with gifts, attention, and very few boundaries. Mom rarely said no to her demands, and Dad tried to win her affection during weekend visits with shopping sprees and entertainment. Natalie quickly learned that throwing tantrums or playing our parents against each other yielded rewards. The first time I noticed our relationship shifting was during my junior year of college. I had saved enough to buy a used car, nothing fancy, just a reliable Honda that could get me to classes and work. 3 weeks after I bought it, Natalie, then 14, called asking to borrow it for a mall trip with friends. Despite her not even having a learner's permit, she acted offended when I refused. "You never helped me with anything," she complained. "Mom would let me use her car if it wasn't in the shop." When I stood firm, she went to our mother, who called me later that evening. "Clara, would it really hurt you to help your sister once in a while? She feels like you don't care about her anymore since you moved out." That pattern repeated throughout our adult lives. When Natalie was 19, she showed up at my apartment, unannounced, with 2 suitcases. "My roommate and I had a fight," she announced, pushing past me into my 1-bedroom apartment. "I can stay here for a few months, right?" Those few months stretched into nearly a year. She contributed nothing toward rent or groceries, left messes everywhere, and frequently borrowed my clothes and makeup without asking. When I finally insisted she find her own place, she accused me of abandoning her and turned our mother against me again. The most painful betrayal came 3 years ago. I had been dating Michael, a kind and thoughtful man who I thought might be the one. We had been together for almost a year when I invited him to a family dinner to meet everyone. Natalie, then 24, spent the entire evening flirting with him, touching his arm, laughing too loudly at his jokes, and sharing childhood stories that painted me in an unflattering light. 2 weeks later, Michael confessed that Natalie had been texting him constantly since the dinner. He showed me the messages, many of them inappropriate, and clearly aimed at undermining our relationship. When I confronted her, she claimed she was just being friendly and accused me of being paranoid and controlling. Though Michael and I tried to move past it, the trust had been damaged, and we eventually broke up 6 months later. After each incident, I would distance myself from Natalie for a while, hurt and angry. But eventually, I would convince myself that she was still growing up, that she needed time to mature, that family bonds were worth preserving, despite the pain. I kept hoping that one day she would recognize how her actions affected others and change her behavior. For the past 2 years, our contact had been minimal. I focused on growing my real estate business, reinvesting profits, and working 16-hour days. I rarely shared details about my success with my family, having learned that Natalie would either try to capitalize on it or diminish it with backhanded compliments. When I finally saved enough to buy my dream home, a stunning oceanfront villa with 5 bedrooms, a private pool, and panoramic views of the Atlantic, I kept the purchase quiet. The villa represented everything I had worked for, not just financially but emotionally. It was my sanctuary, my reward for years of discipline and perseverance. The first morning I woke up there watching the sun rise over the ocean from my bedroom balcony, I felt a sense of peace and accomplishment that had eluded me for years. I had invited only 2 close friends to see the property. I hadn't posted about it on social media or told any family members. I wanted to enjoy my private paradise before inevitably sharing it with others. I should have known that my moment of tranquility wouldn't last long once Natalie somehow discovered what I had. The call came on a Friday afternoon while I was working from my home office, reviewing contracts for a commercial property deal. When Natalie's name flashed on my phone screen, my first instinct was to ignore it. We hadn't spoken in almost 6 months, not since Christmas when she had made a scene about the gift I brought being less expensive than what I had given our mother. Something told me to answer, though I immediately regretted it when I heard her voice. "Clara, thank goodness you picked up," she said without bothering with a greeting. "Listen, we're on our way to you right now. There will be 15 of us. We need you to prepare beds, towels, slippers, and plenty of food. We'll be staying for 3 weeks. We're about 40 minutes away, so hurry up." I felt my blood pressure rising with each entitled word. "Natalie, what are you talking about? Who's we? And how do you even know where I live?" "Your new beach mansion, of course," she said with a laugh that raised the hair on my arms. "Janelle posted pictures of your housewarming on her Instagram. I saw them last week. It looks amazing. Perfect for our summer vacation. We were going to rent places in Virginia Beach, but this is so much better, and free." Janelle was one of the 2 friends I had invited over. She had asked permission to take a few photos of the sunset from my deck, but I had no idea she had posted them publicly or tagged the location. I made a mental note to have a serious conversation with her later. "So the gang's all here," Natalie continued, road noise and music pulsing in the background. Me, Tyler, Amber Scott, and his new girlfriend, the twins Brock, Lindsay, Dave, Marcus, Zoe, Kevin, and Kelsey with her boyfriend. Oh, and we might have a few more join later in the week. I recognized most of the names. This was Natalie's party crew, the same people who had trashed our parents' lake house 2 summers ago during an unauthorized weekend stay. They had broken furniture, stained carpets, put holes in walls, and even damaged the boat dock. Dad had to spend thousands on repairs, but as usual, Natalie faced no consequences. "Natalie, you can't just show up at my house with 15 people and expect to stay for 3 weeks, I said, trying to keep my voice level. "That's not how this works." "Oh, come on, don't be so uptight. You have that huge place all to yourself. What's the point of having a mansion if you don't share it? We're family, Clara. Family helps family." The emotional manipulation was so familiar, it almost made me laugh. In Natalie's world, family helps family had always been a one-way street with me giving and her taking. "Besides," she continued, "we've already started our drive. Everyone took time off work. We can't change plans now. It would ruin everyone's summer." As she spoke, I could hear her friends in the background laughing and shouting. Someone yelled, "Tell her we want the master bedroom," followed by more laughter. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. At 34 years old, I had finally built something valuable for myself. This house represented years of sacrifice and hard work. I had skipped vacations, worked weekends, and lived frugally to save every penny. And now, Natalie expected me to hand it over to her and her friends' people who had never shown respect for others' property. My mind raced with visions of what 3 weeks would look like: alcohol spilled on my new furniture, strangers in my private spaces, late-night parties, keeping the neighbors awake, food and trash everywhere. Beyond the physical damage, there would be the emotional cost of having my boundaries trampled once again. For years, I had allowed Natalie to take advantage of my generosity. I had forgiven her betrayals, made excuses for her behavior, and continued to hope she would change. But standing in my dream home, looking out at the ocean I had worked so hard to wake up to every morning, something inside me finally snapped. "No," I said firmly. "This isn't happening, Natalie. You and your friends need to find somewhere else to stay." There was a moment of silence before she burst into laughter. Very funny. Seriously, though, can you make sure the fridge is stocked with beer? And Tyler's a vegetarian now, so you'll need to have options for him." She wasn't listening. She never did. In that moment, I realized that no matter what I said on the phone, Natalie and her entourage would still show up at my door expecting to be welcomed and accommodated. They would push past me, invade my space, and take over my home just as Natalie had been doing to me our entire lives. A strange calm settled over me as I made my decision. This time would be different. This time I would stand my ground, even if it meant creating a family rift that might never heal. Some boundaries once crossed too many times needed to be defended at all costs. "I'll see you when you get here," I said, then hung up before she could respond. Looking around at my beautiful home, I felt both sadness and resolve. I didn't want conflict, but I was no longer willing to sacrifice my well-being to avoid it. Natalie had given me no choice but to finally draw a line that could not be crossed. I had 40 minutes to prepare, not for guests, but for the confrontation that was about to arrive at my doorstep. The moment I hung up the phone, my mind shifted into strategic planning mode, the same focus I used when negotiating complex real estate deals. I needed to prepare for multiple scenarios, anticipate Natalie's tactics, and establish clear boundaries with consequences. My first call was to Thomas and Diana, my neighbors on either side of my property. Both were retired couples who had warmly welcomed me to the neighborhood. I explained the situation briefly, apologizing for any potential disturbance and asking them to contact me directly if there were any noise issues over the next few hours. I also wanted witnesses aware of the situation in case things escalated. "We've got your back," Clara Thomas assured me. "Everyone deserves peace in their own home. Diana and I will keep an eye out." My next call was to Blue Harbor Security, the private company that patrolled our gated community. I had developed a good relationship with the head of security, Marcus, during my property closing. "I'm expecting an unwelcome group of approximately 15 people attempting to stay at my residence without invitation," I explained. "They're family and friends of my sister who hasn't accepted that they can't stay here. I'd appreciate additional patrol presence near my property this afternoon." Marcus was professional and understanding. "We'll have 2 officers nearby. If you need immediate assistance, use the community emergency line and we can be there within 3 minutes." This wasn't just about today's confrontation. It was about establishing precedent. If I allowed Natalie and her friends to stay even one night, it would reinforce her belief that my boundaries were optional and my no didn't really mean no. I went to my office and set up my phone to record any further conversations with Natalie. Pennsylvania was a 2-party consent state for recordings, but I planned to inform her immediately that I was recording, giving her the legal notice required, while also sending a clear message that I was documenting everything. Next, I printed copies of my property deed and homeowner's insurance policy, which explicitly stated that unauthorized guests were not covered for any injuries on the property. I also wrote down the names and contact information for several hotels and vacation rentals within a 20-mile radius that still had availability according to quick searches on booking sites. I placed security cameras at my front entrance and back patio, activated the alert features on my home security system, and made sure my exterior gates were closed but unlocked. I didn't want to create a situation where Natalie could claim I had trapped her or her friends on my property. As I moved through these preparations, I felt a strange mix of emotions. There was anger, certainly, at Natalie's entitlement and disrespect. There was anxiety about the confrontation to come. But underlying everything was a profound sadness. How had our relationship deteriorated to this point? When had my sister decided that my feelings and boundaries mattered so little? I thought back to when Natalie was born. I was 7 years old and so excited to have a baby sister. I remembered helping Mom change her diapers, reading her stories at bedtime, and teaching her to ride a bike. I had protected her from bullies at school and helped her with homework. Somewhere along the way, that sweet little girl had transformed into someone who saw me not as a person with feelings and rights, but as a resource to be exploited. Part of me still wanted to believe this was just a phase, that the real Natalie was still in there somewhere, capable of empathy and growth. But I had been telling myself that story for years, and nothing had changed. At some point, I had to accept reality. My relationship with my sister was fundamentally unhealthy, and it would not improve unless I established and maintained firm boundaries, regardless of the short-term pain it might cause. I prepared a simple script for myself, focusing on I statements rather than accusations. I am not comfortable with unexpected guests staying in my home. I need advance notice, and my explicit agreement before any visitors stay here. I value my privacy and peace in my own home. Having these statements ready would help me stay calm and consistent when emotions ran high. Looking at the clock, I saw that 35 minutes had passed since Natalie's call. They would be arriving soon. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked out to my front porch to wait. This was my home, my sanctuary, that I had earned through years of hard work. I deserved to decide who entered it and on what terms. As I stood on the porch watching the road that led to my property, I felt a surprising sense of calm resolve replace my earlier anxiety. For too long, I had been the one to compromise, to accommodate, to keep the peace at my own expense. Today, that pattern would end. I could see dust rising in the distance as cars approached. The moment of truth had arrived. 3 vehicles appeared on the horizon, kicking up dust as they sped down the private road leading to my villa. A red convertible led the caravan with Natalie's blonde hair whipping in the wind as she drove. Behind her followed a black SUV packed with people and a blue sedan bringing up the rear. Even from a distance, I could hear music blasting and people shouting excitedly. The small convoy pulled into my circular driveway, parking haphazardly across the pavers I had specially installed last month. The convertible's doors opened, and Natalie emerged wearing oversized sunglasses and a beach cover-up that probably cost more than she paid in rent. She didn't even glance in my direction as she called out to the others. "We're here. Grab your stuff, and let's get this party started." The scene that unfolded looked like the beginning of a spring break movie. 15 young adults, all in their mid to late 20s, spilled out of the vehicles. They unloaded enough luggage for a month-long stay, along with coolers of alcohol, portable speakers, inflatable pool toys, and what appeared to be a folding beer pong table. 2 guys immediately headed toward my infinity pool, already stripping off their shirts. "Pool's open," one of them shouted, kicking off his shoes on my manicured lawn. Another group started unloading cases of beer and bottles of liquor from the SUV's trunk, discussing where to set up the main bar. A girl with pink hair was already taking selfies against the backdrop of my home, tagging the location for her social media followers. Through all this, Natalie hadn't acknowledged my presence on the porch. She was directing traffic like a general, pointing people toward different parts of my property. "Amber and Scott, you guys take the master suite upstairs. Tyler and I will take the blue room with the ocean view. Dave and Marcus, you're in the guest house. Kevin, you and Lindsay figure out who gets the room with the private bathroom." I stepped forward, positioning myself at the bottom of the front steps, directly in their path to my front door. My arms were crossed, my expression neutral, but firm. "Natalie," I said, my voice cutting through their chatter, "we need to talk before anyone goes inside." She finally turned toward me, pushing her sunglasses up on her head. Her smile was confident, almost smug. "Clara, there you are. The place is even more amazing in person. You've done really well for yourself." She gestured around as if complimenting a venue she had rented. "We brought our own alcohol, but we'll need to grocery shop for food. Is there a good delivery service out here?" "No one is going inside," I stated firmly. "As I told you on the phone, you can't stay here." Her smile faltered slightly, but she rolled her eyes for her friend's benefit. "She's just being dramatic. Clara loves playing the responsible older sister." She turned back to me with a stage whisper. "Seriously, though, we've been driving for hours. Can we at least use the bathrooms before you give us your lecture?" "There's a gas station 2 miles back down the road," I replied evenly. "You can use their facilities before you find alternative accommodations." The pool-bound guys, now hearing the conversation, paused their advance toward the water. The group unloading alcohol stopped mid-motion. Natalie's expression darkened as she realized I was serious. "Clara, stop being ridiculous. We're already here. Where exactly do you expect 15 people to go on a summer weekend at the last minute?" "That's not my problem to solve, Natalie. You created this situation by making plans to use my home without my permission. I've compiled a list of hotels and rentals in the area that still have availability. I held up the printed list I had prepared. Natalie's face flushed red. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You're really going to embarrass me in front of everyone, after everything I've done for you. What exactly have you done for me, Natalie? I asked quietly. She blinked momentarily, thrown off script. Then she rallied, her voice rising emotionally. I'm your sister. Your only sister. Family supports each other. Mom would be so disappointed to see how selfish you've become. Is this big fancy house worth destroying our relationship? It was a masterful performance designed to make me the villain. I noticed several of her friends exchange uncomfortable glances. A tall guy I recognized as Tyler stepped forward, putting his arm around Natalie's shoulders. Come on, Clara, he said with forced friendliness. We won't make a mess, I promise. We're all adults here. Let's just enjoy the weekend together, and we can help with cleaning and expenses. I shook my head. This isn't a negotiation. I'm not comfortable having 15 unexpected guests in my home for 3 weeks. You need to leave now. Or what? This came from a muscular guy unloading beer from the SUV. You gonna call the cops on your own sister? That would make for some awkward Thanksgiving dinner. This is private property, I stated calmly. If you refuse to leave when asked, then yes, I will involve authorities. Natalie gave a sharp, humorless laugh. She's bluffing. Clara always bluffs. She talks tough, but then caves because she cares too much what everyone thinks of her. She turned to address me directly. You won't call anyone because you know how it will look. Poor little rich girl, too selfish to share her mansion with family. She brushed past me and headed for the front door, keyless entry fob in hand. I felt a chill, realizing she must have somehow gotten a copy of my house key. I quickly pulled out my phone and pressed the emergency button on my security app. I'm recording this interaction, I announced clearly, holding up my phone, and I've already contacted security. This is your final opportunity to leave voluntarily. Natalie froze at the door, her back to me. You're recording us. What is wrong with you? I want documentation of what's happening here, I said calmly, since you've refused to respect my clearly stated boundaries. She whirled around, her expression a mix of shock and rage. Boundaries? We're not co-workers, Clara. We're sisters. There aren't supposed to be boundaries between family. That's exactly where boundaries matter most, I replied, surprised by how steady my voice remained, because those relationships are too important to damage with disrespect and entitlement. Entitlement, she sputtered, looking around at her friends for support. You're the one living in a multi-million-dollar beach house while I can barely make rent each month. If anyone's entitled here, it's you. I could see her friends shifting uncomfortably. This wasn't the fun beach vacation they had been promised. The pink-haired girl whispered something to her companion, and they both drifted back toward one of the cars. My financial situation is the result of choices I've made and work I've done, I said, just as yours is. I've invited you to networking events, offered to help you find better jobs, even offered to pay for courses to build your skills. You declined every offer. Because I don't want your charity, she shouted, tears now forming in her eyes. The performance was escalating. I just wanted to spend time with my sister at her beautiful home. Is that so terrible? Before I could respond, a security vehicle pulled into my driveway, followed by a second one. 2 uniformed officers stepped out and approached our group. Miss Bennett, the taller officer, addressed me. We received your alert. Is everything all right? No, I replied calmly. These individuals are attempting to stay at my property against my express wishes. I've asked them to leave multiple times. This is my sister Natalie, interjected quickly, wiping away tears. It's a family misunderstanding. We don't need security involved. The officer looked between us, his expression professional and neutral. Ma'am, regardless of family relationship, the property owner has the right to determine who stays on their property. If she's asking you to leave, you need to comply. This is insane, Tyler muttered, pulling out his phone. I'm calling an Uber. The spell was breaking. One by one, Natalie's friends began to realize that this wasn't going to end with them partying at a beach mansion. They started drifting back toward their vehicles, gathering the bags and supplies they had unloaded. Natalie stood alone at my front door, mascara streaking down her cheeks, the picture of abandonment. "I can't believe you're doing this to me," she said, her voice breaking dramatically. "After everything we've been through." I held out the list of local accommodations. "Here are options within your budget. Several have availability for large groups." She ignored the paper, her expression hardening. "Don't bother coming to Mom's for Thanksgiving, or Christmas, or ever again. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of person you really are." With that final threat, she stormed back to her convertible. Her remaining friends hurriedly loaded their belongings, avoiding eye contact with me and the security officers. Within minutes, the caravan that had arrived with such excitement was backing out of my driveway, Natalie, in the lead tires spinning on gravel as she accelerated away. As they disappeared down the road, I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that they were gone, sadness for the relationship that had deteriorated to this point, but underneath it all, a quiet pride that I had finally stood my ground. The security officers asked if I wanted to file a report or change my locks. I thanked them and said I would handle it from here. As they drove away, I turned back toward my empty, peaceful home. For the first time in hours, I took a deep breath that didn't feel constricted by anxiety. The confrontation was over, but I knew the fallout was just beginning. Natalie wasn't one to accept defeat gracefully. Her parting threat wasn't empty. She would indeed try to turn family and friends against me. The question now was whether I was strong enough to weather that storm. As I walked back inside, my phone buzzed with an incoming text. It was from my mother. Natalie is in tears. Call me immediately. And so it begins, I thought, closing the door behind me. I decided not to call my mother immediately. Instead, I took an hour to decompress, making myself a cup of tea and sitting on my deck overlooking the ocean. I needed to center myself before the next wave hit. The confrontation with Natalie had gone as expected, but I knew the family fallout would be more challenging to navigate. When my phone rang again, I wasn't surprised to see my mother's name on the screen. Taking a deep breath, I answered. "Clara Bennett speaking," I said formally, already setting a tone of emotional distance. "Clara, what on earth is going on?" My mother's voice was tight with anger. Natalie called me sobbing. "She said you had security guards remove her from your property like some kind of criminal. Please tell me that's not true." "Mom, did Natalie tell you she tried to show up at my house with 14 friends planning to stay for 3 weeks without ever asking my permission?" There was a brief pause. "She said she was bringing some friends for a visit and you overreacted." "A visit?" I couldn't help but laugh. She called me 40 minutes before arriving to announce that 15 people would be staying in my home for 3 weeks. They brought enough alcohol to stock a bar and were already assigning themselves bedrooms, including my master suite. That's not a visit, that's a hostile takeover. "Well, you could have handled it more diplomatically," my mother said, her voice softening slightly. "You know how sensitive your sister is. Now she's stranded with all her friends having to scramble for accommodations." I gave her a list of available hotels and vacation rentals in the area. I said calmly, "And she's not stranded. She has a car, money, and a cell phone. What she doesn't have is the right to use my home without permission." My mother sighed heavily. "Clara, she's your sister. Sometimes family imposes, that's just part of life. Your father and I raised you to be generous." "Generosity is freely given, not taken by force," I replied. "And this isn't the first time Natalie has taken advantage of me. It's a pattern that's gone on for years and I've reached my limit." "What do you mean, taken advantage? Natalie has always looked up to you." I realized then how differently my mother and I viewed my relationship with Natalie. In her version of reality, we were close sisters with typical squabbles. She had no idea about the countless times Natalie had manipulated, undermined, or exploited me. "Mom, I'm going to send you something," I said, my finger hovering over the recording of today's confrontation. "It's a video of what actually happened today. I'd like you to watch it before we continue this conversation." "I don't need to see a video, Clara. I need you to fix this situation. Natalie says you've ruined her whole summer." Natalie ruined her own summer by making plans that depended on using someone else's home without permission. I'm not responsible for fixing problems she created. I can't believe how cold you've become, my mother, said her voice breaking. Success has changed you, and not for the better. The accusations stung, but I refused to be manipulated. Mom, I love you, but I'm not going to apologize for having boundaries. When you're ready to have a balanced discussion about this, I'm here. Until then, I need some space. I ended the call before she could respond, knowing that continuing would only lead to more hurt feelings. Within minutes, my phone began lighting up with texts and calls from extended family members. Apparently, Natalie had wasted no time in spreading her version of events. From Aunt Patricia Clara, how could you turn away your own sister? Family should always come first. From Cousin Michael Heard what happened with Natalie. Not cool, cuz. Sharing is caring. From Uncle Robert, your grandmother would be so disappointed in your behavior. I silenced my phone and opened my laptop. It was time for phase 2 of my plan. I compiled the recording from today, screenshots of Natalie's text messages demanding use of my home and photos of the security app alerts showing someone attempting to use a copied key fob on my door after I had deactivated it. I drafted a simple, factual email explaining what had happened, attached the evidence, and sent it to key family members, including my father, who had remained silent throughout this ordeal. I understand that Natalie has shared her perspective on today's events, I wrote. For those interested in what actually transpired, I've attached documentation. I love my family deeply, but I will not allow myself to be bullied or manipulated in my own home. I hope you can understand and respect my position, even if you disagree with my actions. With that sent, I contacted a locksmith to change my locks and reprogram my security system, canceling all existing key fobs and creating new ones. I also called Janelle, my friend, who had inadvertently revealed my new home to Natalie through social media posts. Janelle, I need to let you know what happened today. I explained the situation calmly. Oh my God, Clara. I had no idea, she gasped. I didn't think about tagging the location. I'm so sorry. I understand you didn't mean any harm, I assured her. But in the future, please check with me before posting anything about my home or location. I value my privacy for reasons that probably make more sense to you now. She promised to be more thoughtful going forward and offered to help in any way she could. I thanked her and ended the call feeling a small weight lift. At least that friendship wasn't damaged. By evening, responses to my email had begun trickling in. My father called, his voice gruff with emotion. I saw your video, he said without preamble. Natalie was out of line. You did the right thing, standing your ground. His support meant more than I expected. Thanks, Dad. It wasn't easy. It never is with her, he admitted. Your mother and we didn't do right by either of you after the divorce. We let Natalie get away with too much, and we expected too much from you. I'm sorry for that. His apology brought unexpected tears to my eyes. I appreciate you saying that. I'll talk to your mother, he promised. She'll come around eventually, and don't worry about Natalie. She'll find someone else to latch onto once she realizes you're not giving in. After we hung up, I received an email from my mother. It was brief but significant. I watched the video. We need to talk tomorrow when I've had time to process this. I love you. It wasn't an apology, but it was an opening. Progress, however small, was still progress. As night fell, I sat on my deck with a glass of wine, looking out at the moonlight reflecting on the ocean. My phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. You think you've won, but this isn't over. Hope your big empty house is worth losing your family over. I didn't respond. Instead, I blocked her number, at least temporarily. I needed space to heal and reflect without her constant attempts to manipulate me. For the first time in years, I had stood firm against Natalie's emotional terrorism. The consequences were painful but necessary. My home was quiet, peaceful, and most importantly, still mine. Whatever storms lay ahead, I would weather them, knowing I had finally broken the cycle of giving in to preserve a false peace. The next morning dawned clear and beautiful, but the peaceful atmosphere of my oceanfront home contrasted sharply with the chaos unfolding in my family relationships. My phone had accumulated dozens of missed calls, voicemails, and messages overnight, even with Natalie's number blocked. I made coffee and sat at my kitchen island sorting through the digital aftermath. There were several family members I genuinely cared about hearing from, so I couldn't simply ignore everything. The first message I opened was from my cousin Emma, who had always been a voice of reason in family disputes. "Clara, I got your email and Natalie's version. Having known you both all our lives, I'm inclined to believe your account. Standing your ground was brave. Let me know if you need someone to talk to. Love you." Her support warmed me, a reminder that not everyone in the family would blindly take Natalie's side. My mother had sent a longer email after her brief message the previous night. "Clara, after watching that video, I'm shocked and disappointed, but not with you. I had no idea Natalie spoke to you that way, or that she would make such demanding assumptions about your property. While I still wish there had been a way to resolve this without security involvement, I understand better now why you felt cornered. However, she is still your sister and she's hurting. She and her friends ended up having to split up among 3 different hotels at considerable expense. She feels humiliated in front of her friends. Perhaps once things calm down, you might consider a private conversation with just her to see if there's a path forward for your relationship. I love you both and hate seeing this divide." It was more understanding than I had expected, but still contained the subtle pressure to reconcile that had characterized my mother's approach to our conflicts throughout our lives. Always the burden of peacemaking fell to me, even when I was the wronged party. As I continued through the messages, a disturbing pattern emerged. While immediate family who had seen my evidence were somewhat supportive, extended family and mutual friends were receiving a very different story from Natalie. My Aunt Linda had posted on Facebook, "Family heartbreak today. So sad when material success changes people so much they forget the importance of family bonds and sharing blessings. Praying for healing and humility for certain family members." Though she hadn't named me directly, the timing and phrasing made it clear who she meant. The post had dozens of sympathetic comments, including several from people who knew both Natalie and me. My phone rang, displaying my father's number. "Morning, Dad," I answered, bracing myself. "Clara," his voice was tense. "Have you seen what Natalie's posting online?" "Just Aunt Linda's vague Facebook prayer request for my soul," I said dryly. "Check your Instagram. Natalie's gone full character assassination." I pulled up Instagram on my laptop and found Natalie had created a highlights story titled "When Family Betrays You." It contained tearful videos of her recounting how her successful sister had called armed guards to remove her from the property after inviting her for a summer visit. She claimed I had always been jealous of her close friendships and wanted to punish her for having a social life. "This is insane," I muttered, watching her performance. "She's completely rewriting what happened." "That's not all," my father continued grimly. "She's telling everyone you're mentally unstable from work stress and have become paranoid about people trying to take advantage of you. She's suggesting the family needs to consider an intervention." A cold knot formed in my stomach. She's trying to gaslight me to the entire family. It gets worse. "Your mother called me this morning. Natalie showed up at her house at midnight crying about having nowhere to go. She's staying there now, and she's convinced your mother that this whole situation stems from childhood jealousy and your inability to share. Your mother's starting to buy into it." I closed my eyes, feeling a headache forming. Natalie was executing a masterclass in manipulation, using every emotional lever at her disposal. What should I do, Dad? Engage and defend myself, or ignore it and look like I'm admitting guilt by silence? He sighed heavily. I wish I had a clear answer. Engaging gives her more ammunition, but silence lets her control the narrative. Either way, she wins attention, which is what she really wants. After we hung up, I sat staring at the ocean, feeling suddenly isolated in my beautiful home. The property that represented my hard work and success now felt like a fortress separating me from my family. Had standing my ground been worth this cost? Before I could spiral further into doubt, my phone rang again. It was Amber, one of Natalie's friends who had been part of the group that showed up at my house. Cautiously, I answered. "Hello? Clara, it's Amber Lewis. We met briefly yesterday when..." She trailed off awkwardly. "When my sister tried to commandeer my house, I finished for her. What can I do for you, Amber?" I wanted to apologize, she said, surprising me. "And to let you know that what Natalie's saying online isn't right. Most of us had no idea she hadn't actually cleared this trip with you. She told us all you were excited to host us and had been planning it for weeks." I felt a rush of validation hearing this. "Thank you for telling me that." "There's more," Amber continued. "Natalie's done this before with other friends and family members. She told us her cousin had offered their lake house last summer, but when we arrived, the cousin was completely surprised. It was incredibly awkward, but they let us stay to avoid a scene. Natalie knows most people will give in rather than create conflict." "But I didn't," I said quietly. "No, you didn't. And honestly, while it was embarrassing yesterday, I respect you for it. Boundaries are important." She paused. "Anyway, I thought you should know that not everyone believes her version. A few of us have called her out privately, which is probably why she's escalating the drama online. When people challenge her directly, she always finds a bigger audience to validate her." After thanking Amber for her honesty, I decided on a measured response to Natalie's campaign. I wouldn't engage in a point-by-point defense or create competing tearful videos. Instead, I posted a single dignified statement on my rarely used Facebook page. "To my friends and family who have reached out with concern, thank you for caring. There has been a private family matter that has unfortunately spilled into public view. While I won't be addressing specific claims or accusations, I want to assure everyone that I'm well and simply establishing healthy boundaries in all my relationships. I ask for understanding and respect for my privacy during this time." I then emailed the recording of the confrontation to a few key family members who might still be on the fence, along with a brief message explaining that I was stepping back from the conflict but wanted them to have access to the truth. That evening, my mother called, her voice tight with conflicted emotions. "Clara, we need to talk about how to fix this situation. Natalie is devastated, and this rift is tearing the family apart." "What exactly would fixing it look like to you, Mom?" I asked carefully. "Well," she hesitated. "Natalie suggested that perhaps you could make it up to her by letting her use the house later this summer, perhaps just her without the large group. She feels that would help restore her dignity with her friends." I nearly dropped the phone in disbelief. Let me get this straight. After showing up uninvited with 14 people attempting to use a copied key to enter my house when explicitly told not to, and then launching a smear campaign against me online, Natalie thinks I should make it up to her by rewarding her behavior with exactly what she wanted in the first place. "When you put it that way, it sounds unreasonable," my mother admitted. "But she is your sister, and sometimes being the bigger person means—" "No," I interrupted firmly. "Being the bigger person doesn't mean letting someone repeatedly violate my boundaries. It means standing firm in my self-respect while still being open to genuine reconciliation if Natalie ever decides to take responsibility for her actions." "So you're refusing to compromise at all?" My mother's disappointment was palpable. "This isn't about compromise, Mom. This is about basic respect. Would you let someone who tried to force their way into your home, then publicly slandered you, borrow that same home as a compromise?" Her silence was answer enough. "I love you and I love our family," I said more gently. "But I won't participate in this dysfunctional pattern anymore. When Natalie is ready to acknowledge what really happened and apologize, I'll be ready to talk. Until then, I need space from both of you." As I ended the call, I felt both heartbroken and resolute. The path I had chosen was painful but necessary. For too long, I had allowed my desire for family harmony to override my need for respect and healthy relationships. Breaking that pattern meant weathering this storm, even if I had to do it alone. I walked through my quiet house to the back deck, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and pink. This home represented not just financial success, but emotional freedom. I had created a space where I felt safe, peaceful, and in control of my own environment. No relationship, not even family, was worth sacrificing my self-respect and mental well-being. That wasn't selfishness, it was survival. My phone pinged with a text from my father: "Standing with you, kiddo. This will pass. You're doing the right thing." Those simple words were a lifeline. I wasn't completely alone after all, and for now, that was enough. 3 months passed with minimal contact between me and most of my family. I immersed myself in work, took a solo trip to Portugal that I'd been postponing for years, and spent time strengthening friendships with people who respected my boundaries. The distance from family drama was painful but clarifying, like setting a broken bone so it could finally heal properly. Occasionally, updates about Natalie filtered through to me via my father or cousin Emma. She had moved in with our mother temporarily after her lease ended, was between jobs again, and had cycled through several friend groups. Her social media remained a carefully curated highlight reel that bore little resemblance to her actual circumstances. 6 months after the confrontation at my villa, I received an unexpected text from my mother. "I think it's time we all talked, face to face. Would you be willing to meet with Natalie and me?" My immediate instinct was to refuse. Our last interactions had been so painful, and I had finally found peace in the distance. But a small voice inside reminded me that running from difficult conversations wasn't the answer either. Setting boundaries didn't mean cutting off all possibility of reconciliation. It meant establishing the conditions under which reconciliation could occur. After careful consideration, I agreed to meet them at a neutral location, a private dining room at a restaurant halfway between our homes. I arrived early, choosing a seat facing the door so I could see them enter. My heart raced as I waited, unsure what to expect. They arrived together, my mother looking anxious, Natalie uncharacteristically subdued. Gone was the dramatic makeup and flashy clothing she typically wore. Instead, she was dressed simply in jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She met my eyes briefly, then looked away. After awkward greetings and ordering drinks, an uncomfortable silence fell over our table. Finally, my mother spoke. "Clara, thank you for agreeing to meet. These past months have been difficult for all of us. I think we need to clear the air and find a way forward as a family." I nodded, but said nothing, waiting to see where this was heading. "Natalie has something she'd like to say to you," my mother prompted gently. Natalie fidgeted with her napkin, clearly uncomfortable. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet but steady. "I've been seeing a therapist for the past 3 months," she began, surprising me. "It started because Mom made it a condition of me staying with her, but it's actually been helpful." She took a deep breath and continued. "My therapist helped me see some patterns in my behavior, how I've been using people, especially you, Clara, taking advantage of your generosity and manipulating situations to get what I want." She paused, struggling visibly with what came next. "What I did that day at your house was wrong. I had no right to show up like that or to expect you to accommodate me and my friends. And the things I said afterward, the lies I spread about you, that was even worse." Tears filled her eyes, but these weren't the calculated, manipulative tears I'd seen so many times before. These seemed genuine, accompanied by a vulnerability I'd rarely witnessed in my sister. "I'm sorry, Clara. Truly sorry. I don't expect you to forgive me right away or to trust me again. I wouldn't in your position. But I want you to know that I'm working on myself, trying to understand why I behave the way I do and how to change it." I sat in stunned silence, processing her words. This was not the conversation I had expected. I had prepared for accusations, guilt trips, and subtle manipulation, not what appeared to be a sincere apology. "What made you decide to go to therapy?" I asked finally. Natalie glanced at our mother, then back to me. After everything calmed down, Mom showed me the recording of that day. Watching myself, how I spoke to you, how entitled I acted, it was like seeing a stranger, a person I didn't want to be. Our mother reached over and squeezed Natalie's hand encouragingly. "It made me look at other situations too," Natalie continued. "How I've treated friends, boyfriends, employers. There's a pattern of me taking and rarely giving, of manipulating people to get what I want without considering their feelings. I don't want to be that person anymore." I felt a complex mix of emotions, cautious hope, lingering hurt, and a surprising sense of pride in my sister's self-awareness. "Thank you for saying that," I said carefully. "It means a lot to hear you acknowledge what happened. I've struggled these past months, questioning whether I did the right thing by standing firm." "You did," Natalie said quickly. "You absolutely did. I needed someone to finally say no to me. Everyone else always gives in to avoid conflict, which just reinforced my worst behaviors." Our mother looked down, a silent acknowledgement of her own role in the dynamic. "I don't expect us to go back to being close right away," Natalie added, "but I hope we can start rebuilding on healthier terms this time." The conversation that followed was one of the most honest we'd ever had as a family. My mother acknowledged how she had enabled Natalie's behavior, while expecting me to always be the responsible one. I shared how isolated and used I had often felt, expected to give endlessly without complaint. Natalie described her jealousy of my success and her feelings of inadequacy that she masked with entitlement and demands. "I want you both to know something," I said toward the end of our meal. "I never wanted to cut either of you from my life. I just needed respect and healthy boundaries. My home, my success, my peace, these things matter to me because I worked hard for them, not because I value possessions over people." "I understand that now," Natalie said softly, "and I respect it. I want to earn back your trust, however long that takes." We agreed to move forward cautiously. Small steps, clear boundaries, and open communication would be our new foundation. Before we parted, Natalie handed me a letter. "Please read this when you're alone," she said. "It's everything I might not have said well today." That night, sitting on my deck with the sound of waves in the background, I read my sister's letter. It was 8 pages of raw, honest reflection on our relationship, her behaviors, and her commitment to change. The final paragraph brought tears to my eyes. "I've spent so many years taking from you, Clara. Taking your time, your resources, your peace of mind. I want to spend the next years giving back, not to repay a debt, but to build the kind of relationship we should have had all along. One based on mutual respect and genuine love, not manipulation and obligation. Thank you for being strong enough to break our unhealthy pattern when I couldn't see it myself." In the months that followed, we rebuilt our relationship slowly. Natalie continued therapy and found a steady job she actually enjoyed. She respected my boundaries without complaint and made efforts to connect in positive ways rather than only reaching out when she needed something. 6 months after our restaurant meeting, I invited Natalie and my mother to my villa for dinner, the first time either had visited since the confrontation. It was a small gathering with clear parameters one evening, no overnight stay, just the 3 of us sharing a meal and conversation. As we sat on my deck watching the sunset, Natalie turned to me with a genuine smile. "This place really is beautiful, Clara. I'm happy for you that you created this for yourself. You deserve it." Those simple words of acknowledgement, free from envy or calculation, meant more than she could know. The journey to repair our family bonds continues with occasional setbacks but genuine progress. I've learned that standing firm in my boundaries wasn't selfish. It was necessary not only for my well-being, but ultimately for Natalie's growth too. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for others is refuse to participate in their unhealthy patterns. My relationship with Natalie will never be perfect, but it's becoming something authentic and mutually respectful. We're building something new from the ashes of our old dysfunctional dynamic, and in many ways it's stronger than what came before. Sometimes the strongest boundaries create the healthiest relationships. I learned that respect isn't automatic even with family. But when you value yourself enough to demand it, people who truly care will rise to meet your standards. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members? How did it change your relationship? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to stand firm in their own worth. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, true love, even family love, must include respect to be healthy. Wishing you the courage to create the relationships you deserve in your own life.